Mr Finn.
Thank you, Mr Acting President. I rise to speak on the Public Health and Wellbeing Amendment State of Emergency Extensions Bill 2021. And I sincerely hope that everybody was listening to Ms Shing. I hope that everybody was listening to her contribution in this parliament today, because she told us exactly why this legislation should not be passed. Her arrogance on display today is just like the arrogance of the Premier, just like the arrogance of the government that think they know it all and the rest of us don't matter. Remember very early on when the Premier leant over to the Leader of the Opposition in Parliament and said, "You people are just irrelevant." That's his attitude. He thinks the opposition's irrelevant. He thinks the business community is irrelevant. He thinks the people of Victoria are irrelevant. This is all about his power. And more specifically, it's about his power to lock us down. That's what he's mainly concerned about. He's already done it 3 times. Today we decide if it will happen again and again and probably again. Because he's got quite a record, this bloke, this Premier of ours. He's got quite a record. You know, he oversaw a hotel quarantine debacle that led to over 800 people dying who otherwise would not have died. His contact tracing has been found to be abysmal. The whole hotel quarantine debacle has to be seen to be believed. And of course, you've got the inquiry that was set up basically to establish that nobody did anything. And I knew as soon as I saw the terms of reference what was going on. This was an inquiry that was set up to clear the Premier. So the Premier could stand up and say, and as well as a number of other ministers, one minister didn't actually make it through the inquiry. But the Premier got up and he said, "I don't remember. No, I don't know." Now, if anybody believes that, I have got a bridge in Sydney to sell them. There is no way that a man like Daniel Andrews, a man who is a control freak, who runs everything personally, there is no way he did not know what happened with the hotel quarantine. So there we have a man who is asking us for permission to give him extended power, basically for the rest of this year, almost until Christmas. What a prospect, what a prospect. And of course, with the 3 lockdowns we've had so far, they have been absolutely and totally devastating. I recall spending many hours, many days in fact, on the phone last year during the lockdown, speaking to people, whether they be people with families who were going through mental health crisis, whether they were business people who had lost everything and were just absolutely devastated, people who just thought that there was no future. This is what this lockdown, what Daniel Andrews did to people. They thought they had no future. Large sections of this state were absolutely devastated, and no more so than the City of Melbourne. Now, I hear the Lord Mayor talk about the City of Melbourne and saying, "Oh, it's great, it's going marvellously well." Well, I don't know what city the Lord Mayor's in, but she's certainly not in Melbourne, because anybody who walks through the City of Melbourne, as I do frequently, will see the empty shops, will see the signs for lease, will see so many businesses that have hit the wall. And behind every business that has hit the wall, every small business that has hit the wall, is a personal tragedy. Is the tragedy of a businessman or woman, of a family who have lost everything. I wouldn't be proud of that if I was the Premier. I suggest the Premier should go out and have a look through the city, go for a walk through the CBD and have a look at what he has done to this formerly great city of Melbourne. And now he wants another 9 months. We are currently living and have been living for almost a year under the constant threat of lockdown. Under the constant threat of lockdown, and the Premier wants 9 more months at this point. We all know what's going to happen. If he gets his way today, the 15th of December will come along and he'll want to take it into to 2022. We have this extraordinary situation where the Premier has only one weapon. The only arrow in his bow is lockdown. Now, we have seen overseas, we have seen interstate, that lockdown is not the answer. Lockdown can be as devastating, if not more devastating, than the virus. We cannot accept that this is the future of Victoria going forward. Because if this is the future of Victoria going forward, we have no future. Nobody will invest in this state. Nobody will build businesses. Nobody will employ people. Already we have seen thousands and thousands of people flee this state since they're actually able to get out. And they've gone to New South Wales. They've gone to Queensland. And I have to say at the moment, particularly if this legislation gets through, you can hardly blame them. You can hardly blame them, because we have been through the world's longest lockdown, the most severe and longest lockdown in the world, here in Victoria. And it's purely because we have a Premier who is both power hungry and is incompetent. If he was competent, he'd know how to handle this thing without destroying the place. But he didn't. So he did. He's destroyed the place. It's just absolutely extraordinary. And I was up in New South Wales, up in Sydney, had a couple of days off, and that was all I had, I tell you, after the Christmas break. Just before Christmas, I was up in Sydney when the Northern Beaches cluster erupted, and the Premier up there, Gladys Berejiklian, and I have to say, I'm not necessarily her greatest fan, but she handled it perfectly. Certainly handled it far better than anything that we have seen here in Victoria. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about the Premier's negligence. All he has to do is to look to New South Wales. All he has to do is to ring the Premier of New South Wales and ask her how to do it, because she knows. She knows. She doesn't lock everybody down. She doesn't shut all the shops up. She doesn't put the entire state at risk as a result of her policies. Why can't we do in Victoria what they do in New South Wales? Now, I have always been a proud Victorian, an exceedingly proud Victorian, and it hurts me. It hurts me to compare to New South Wales and to come in lacking. It disappoints me, it saddens me, but not as much as it will if this bill is passed and Daniel Andrews once again locks us down. Once again shuts us up. Every one of us can recall being locked in our homes for 23 hours a day. 23 hours a day. We were granted clemency by the great man who allowed us out to go for a walk 1 hour a day. Now, he's done it before. Who's to say he's not going to do it again if this bill is passed today? If I were a betting man, I'd head down to the TAB and I'd have a few bob on that being exactly what is going to happen, because that's why he wants this bill passed. Just extraordinary. And I had quite a bit to do with the Flemington flats situation because, of course, it's in my electorate. And I was having contact from people who had been locked up in their flats. And remember, there were thousands of people locked up with barely any notice at all. You know, the Premier just got up at a press conference at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon and announced that thousands of people were going to be locked up in their homes. They would be under police guard, and that's the way it was going to be until he decided otherwise. And those people in those units, in those flats, they didn't know when they were going to get out. Many of them didn't have enough food to last. And you know, the thing that really distressed me more than anything else about that is that many of the people in those flats in Flemington came from countries where democracy is not a given, where freedom is not a given. They came to Australia to be free. They came to Australia to get away from exactly what Daniel Andrews ended up doing to them. How must they have felt? How must they have felt thinking that they had finally found the land of the free? They had finally reached freedom at last. And here they were, with barely any notice at all, locked in their homes at the pleasure of the Premier of Victoria. What an appalling, disgraceful, despicable decision that was, and one, as the Ombudsman points out, that we should never, ever repeat. The big question is, do we trust this government? Are we prepared to trust this government with another 9 months, of state of emergency? Not on your Nelly. I can't find anybody, apart from members opposite, I can't find anybody who would trust this government, certainly not the people who have been writing to me in droves over the last week, begging me not to vote for this legislation. Well, I'm here to tell them that I'm very pleased to be able to tell them, in fact, that I won't be. That should come as no surprise to anybody. There is no way that I or anybody on this side of the House is going to give Daniel Andrews a blank cheque to do whatever he wants to us, to anybody, over the next 9 months. This is a democracy. If he has urgent issues, let him come to this parliament. Let him explain to members of this parliament exactly what the situation is. It's not like it's a war. The virus can't hear. The virus is not going to take a different course of action because of something Daniel Andrews told the parliament. Let him come back. Let him bring us into his confidence. Let him bring Victorians into his confidence. Because the one thing that Victorians are furious about is that they have been ignored and they have not been told the truth. And they're angry. They are exceedingly. In fact, I've been shocked at how angry some of the people are that I've had contact with, and members opposite will be surprised to learn that I've actually removed a number of posts on my Facebook page because some people were quite forthright on what they would like to do to the Premier. So I felt that it was important that I remove those. But you know, it is important that we have parliamentary overview. You know, this parliament is important. The Premier, I know he thinks he's important. I know he thinks he's more important than all of us combined. I know he thinks he's more important than every Victorian combined, but he's not. This parliament takes precedence. This parliament should have a say in who is locked down and who is locked up. They call it a lockdown. In fact, we were locked up. This parliament must have a say. Bring it back here every month if you want. Let us discuss it. Let us hear what you want and let us decide whether it's worth it. It's not a big ask. It's not a big ask. What is a big ask is being locked down, potentially, for another 9 months. That is not on.